say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Welcome to the Dole Institute of Politics and the 2005 Dole Lecture. If anybody here today is overly nostalgic for Allen Fieldhouse, the venue of last year's lecture, I've received permission from the senator to crank up the heat in here to about 97 degrees. You're okay? My name is Jonathan Earl, and I direct programming at the Institute in addition to my regular duties as a professor in the history department. This is the part of the academic year where people like me grade a lot of papers. Papers I unfortunately have to mark down when the author has no command of the topic, fails to find compelling primary sources, or writes excessively poorly. I recently read Senator Dole's new book, One Soldier Story, which I can tell you comes up a winner in each of these categories. In fact, I would give it an A. Senator Dole, I think I just raised your KU GPA by about 2 percentage points. It's my job today to do 3 things. Describe how you can ask the senator a question after the conclusion of the lecture, issue instructions for our book signing, and introduce my boss here at the Institute. First, the Q&A. We will have 2 microphones. One is a microphone on a stand on the patio outside the Simons Media Room. This is for people seated in Simons and outside in the tents. Feel free to queue up there after the senator concludes his remarks. Another mic is in the custody of our senior fellow at the Institute, Adam Taff, here in Hanson Hall. We'll alternate between the inside microphone and the outside microphone for the Q&A. Now for the book signing. Senator Dole would love to sign everyone's book with all sorts of personal salutations, but there simply won't be enough time. So no personal salutations during the book signing. Number 2 is only the senator's books will be signed. So please don't get in line with your program. The senator will not be signing body parts, etc. Number 3, to ensure everyone gets his or her book signed, we will form 2 lines. One for the people outside, who will queue up right by that microphone outside the Simons Media Room, and the other one will line up starting in the Simons Media Room and stretching out into Hanson Hall. Our intrepid volunteers will then merge the lines, and people will proceed single file into the Rhodes Conference Room with their books. Now for the most pleasant part of my 3 tasks. For a formal introduction of Senator Dole, I have the pleasure of introducing Bill Lacey, who for the past 7 months has ably directed this institute. To this job, he brought 3 decades of experience and expertise spanning from the Reagan White House to several tours with the Republican National Committee and Republican Party to spirited campaigns for, among others, President Reagan, Senator Dole, and Senator Fred Thompson. Since his arrival in Lawrence, the amount of programs at the Dole Institute have increased exponentially. Our staff has filled out, and we now offer internships, archival tours, and semester-long fellowships for political practitioners. Bill has infused this place with energy, excitement, ideas, and humor. Introducing his former boss from tent number 1 outside, I give you Dole Institute Director Bill Lacey.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks a lot, John. First of all, thanks for the wonderful crowd that we have inside, and we also have a fabulous crowd outside. I'm standing at tent 1 right now. Are you guys happy to be here today? And this is a very exciting day for all of us. Thanks also to Senate President Steve Morris and Barbara, who are here with us, House Speaker Doug Mays, Chancellor Bob Hemingway for being part of our event, as well as a number of other elected officials. And I also want to pay special recognition to all veterans who are present today, especially those World War II veterans who've chosen to join us. Let's give them a good hand. Through 2 presidential campaigns, I could hardly get our guest today to tell his story. He resisted because he felt he was just one of thousands who made sacrifices. He was right, of course, but the story still needed to be told. After I learned about his book, I never thought about asking anyone else to do the Dole lecture. His message is that important. We also felt it was important for him to deliver the lecture here at the Dole Institute, his first inside the building that bears his name. I want to take this opportunity to thank the community, both inside, outside in the tents, for their very good-humored approach that you've taken and graciousness in accepting the nature of this event. I think we only had one person who was irate about not getting a seat inside, and that's just wonderful. I've known Bob Dole for 19 years and worked with him during highs and lows. What has always impressed me the most is his resiliency and his perseverance. His refusal to back down to any challenge, no matter what the odds, his ability to face failure and overcome it, his willingness on numerous occasions that I personally witnessed to put what was right ahead of his own political goals. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to welcome to the Dole Institute of Politics, Senator Bob Dole.
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for being here, and particularly thank the people who are outside the building. It's 52 degrees the last time I checked, and a nice little Kansas breeze, so I know it's may not be totally comfortable there, but it's a great honor for me to be in the Dole Institute and to commend Bill Lacey and his great staff and the Chancellor for all the great work that's happening here. This is a bipartisan institution. In fact, some of my friends are saying, why do you have all these Democrats all the time? Can't you find a Republican? So I decided to show up. But it's what we intended to be, a place where students can come and exchange views and speak their mind and criticize whoever they want to criticize. Can't criticize me, I'm not in politics anymore, but, well, yeah, though they can if they want. But I'm really pleased to be here. We're on this book tour, and we were in Wichita last night, and we started signing books at 4:45. We were still there at 11:15. So my hand almost like this, I was walking around. But I think we signed 800 books, and we signed 200 more this morning. So, but that was good news. On next. Next Sunday's New York Times will show we're number 7 on the bestseller list, so that's a lucky number. And hopefully we can either stay there or move up or to stay there. Now, many people have asked me over the years, why don't you write a book about politics? And I said, well, I want people to read my book. And I think people are tired, I don't say they're tired of politics, but just have me get up and start saying, this person was this and this person was this, you're going to be offending some people. And at my age, I don't want to offend anybody. But I did decide when my sister Gloria told me a couple of years ago about this treasure trove of books she had under the bed for about 50 years. There's always someone in every family who collects everything that's loose. And my sister Gloria, every time something would pop up, she'd take it and put it under the bed. And so when we discovered we had between 300 and 400 letters that I'd written while I was at KU, I didn't write home about my grades. I kept telling my parents I was doing fine, just wasn't going to class. But which was a requirement there, Chancellor. You had to go to class. I didn't know that. I never missed a farewell party. And everybody was, enlisting in here and enlisting there. But a lot of us didn't attend classes on a regular basis. But much of the book is about KU and about my 2 years here and about the cost of 50 cents to get a pair of pants cleaned and pressed, and how every Friday I'd box up my clothes and put them on the bus and send them to Russell. My mother would do them on Sunday and get them back on the bus Sunday night, and I'd get fresh clothes Monday morning because it cost a lot of money in those days. 3 cents to get your socks laundered, 4 cents for shorts, and I think a nickel for a t-shirt or undershirt, whatever they called it. So we tried to save money every way we could. And it was a great time at the University of Kansas. Of course, we weren't nearly as large as they are now, but we had a lot of good friends, and I know some of those people are in the audience today. So I wanted to write a book that I hope might be an inspiration to people with serious disabilities, and also to encourage people when they become 45 or 50, they don't think the world's about to end, that you can still be useful when you're 55, 65, 75. I could go on, but I won't. But I can tell you they did a survey about 3 years ago of men in their 70s and 80s, and 1/3 put down middle-aged. So that tells you a lot. We're living longer, we have better medical care, we're still very active, and at 81 I'm still very active. I did take a nasty fall in January that kind of slowed me down for a while, but you don't recover as quickly when you're a little older. But after 41 days in the hospital, I had a new hip and a lot of other things that they did while I was. In fact, they had to feed me again. It was almost like World War II over again. I couldn't raise this arm, so people had to feed me and take me to the bathroom and some of those humiliating things that happened, but they're necessary. So in the book, and I'm not going to dwell on the book because you may have other questions. In the book, just sort of a story, it's about me, but it's not about me, if that makes any sense. It's about my generation. It's about the generation of many people in this audience. And having said that, and I know Bill Lacey alluded to the World War II veterans, I'd like all the World War II veterans and Korean veterans, because some served double duty there, to stand so we can recognize you as we should. I know these fellows can't stand over here, yeah. Oh, way back there, yeah, that's great. Hey, Bob. Glad to see Greensburg and Garden City represented here today. John, thanks for being here. Bob, thank you. If you stop to think a moment about these men who stood up, and a couple of brave soldiers here who can't stand any longer, and think about the contributions they made and where we might be today had we not been victorious, we probably wouldn't be here today, not certain what language we would speak, not certain we could get up and say anything or have any fun criticizing our leaders or anything of that kind. But because we prevailed in World War II, and because we were helpful to people around the world, we have become the leader of the free world. We may not like all the burdens that it carries with it, but somebody has to do it, And I remember in Richard Nixon's last book he wrote, he said, well, if you don't want the U.S. to provide the leadership, who do you want? And he started down the list of countries, and none of them were really qualified at this point in history. Maybe sometime later they will be. But I'm very proud to have a role in building the World War II Memorial. And all these fellows here, I think, probably made contributions, and we're still accepting contributions, though we don't really need the money. It goes into preservation fund. We have enough money left over after having built the memorial. We have about 20 million left over to take care of the memorial for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And if you haven't been there, if your father's still living or mother's still living and they served in World War II, you owe it to them to take them back there and see this magnificent structure. Father's Day is coming up. Mother's Day is May the 8th. There are a lot of big Memorial Day coming up. Veterans Day will be here before we know it. And it's probably right now the busiest memorial in Washington, D.C. Someone said it looked like something Mussolini built. And I was offended by that at first, and I found out he was one of the architects who didn't get the job. So I could understand his reservations about it. But it is a wonderful, it's cost a total of about $170 million. But the good part of it is we didn't run to the government and say, give us the money, we want to build this edifice. We said, let's see if we can raise it privately. If we can't, then we'll go to the government. The government gave us $5 million in startup money. They paid for the dedication. The rest, which is about 150-60 million, came from people like you all over America. We had 600,000 contributors. We had one fellow sent a check. He called me one day and said, where do I send money for the memorial? His name was Sarkis Akopian, an Armenian American. And we told him, and a week later, Joyce McClooney in my office came running the office and sold me a check for $1 million, the largest single contribution. As it turned out, he wasn't a veteran. He was 73 years of age. He came to this country. He wasn't flat broke, but he started a little business, and he said, I owe this to that generation, because had it not been for that generation, I wouldn't have had a business. I wouldn't have made a profit. And I said, boy, for all the money you've given us, would you like to have a seat at the dedication? And I said, for $1 million, you can have my seat at the dedication. But it just demonstrates people like Sarkis Akopian, who's 73 years of age, came to this country as an immigrant, school children, every Legion, VFW, disabled American veterans, and we think it's going to be there for the ages and there for generations to come. Just get back to the book for just a few minutes. My mother is the star in the book, I think, if you've read the book. And I've always felt that mothers really carry the load. They carry the burden. It's either their husband, or it's their son, or it's their grandson, or it's their son-in-law, or it's somebody else in the family. They go off to war, and the mother's there and silently suffers and not able to share the burden sometimes. And as I say in the book, I only heard my mother cry uncontrollably once in my life. And that's when she walked into Winter General Hospital in Topeka and saw me. I looked a little like a scarecrow. I'd lost 70-some pounds, and I had a body cast from my hip to my chin, and I couldn't move either arm. And my right arm was way up in the air in a cast. And but she regained her composure very quickly and said, "Oh, you look so great." Well, I knew then she was stretching it a bit, but and she even learned how to hold cigarettes. A little habit I picked up in World War II. I've since gotten rid of the habit, but they always put little packs, as you guys know, of 4 cigarettes in your sea rations as sort of dessert. And you puff on those things long enough, and it developed quite a market for the tobacco industry, because there were 16.5 million of us served. But today we're down to about 5 million, probably 4.5. We lose about 1,200 veterans every day. So think about these young men up here in the front row, probably average age about 80, 81, 82. How old are you? 84? 89.
81.
And how much?
81.
Yeah, you're just young yet, yeah.
Same age as you are.
Yeah. Anybody over 89? How old? 90. he could go to college free, couldn't he? I think the chancellor wants to talk to you after the program, but in any event, it's the book. I think I learned two things: patience, which I'm still working on, and adaptability. When you can't do things that you could do without a thought, like buttoning your shirt or doing all the things you do, then you wonder, if you lost anything. But if you can adapt and do it some other way, it becomes a positive instead of negative in your life. And I think sometimes the fact that there is strength through adversity, and sometimes I've never met a person who could look me in the eye and say, Bob, I've never had a problem. I've gotten everything I ever wanted. I've achieved everything I ever wanted, whether it's grades in college or your business or the farm or whatever. I've never met a person like that, and I don't think I ever will. Everyone in this audience has had tragedies, and I'm looking at some right now, or they've had difficulties in their life, or they've had little bumps in their life. And I think that's part of success and failure are not polar opposites. You learn a lot sometimes when you don't make it. You learn how it's a lot more fun winning, or if it's your health, you learn to adapt, to do something in a different way you couldn't do the way you did it yesterday. And so I think if there's any lesson in the book, it's hopefully patience and adaptability. I think what I'd like to do now is just take questions. It'd probably be more interesting than me standing up here talking. But I again want to thank all the staff at the Dole Institute and Chancellor Hemingway for his dedicated and continued leadership, which helps us a lot. And we really believe that this institution or this institute can do a lot for students and non-students. So maybe we get a question somewhere. I know there's nobody bashful in this.
We're going to start with a question in Hanson Hall, and then we'll ask the people outside to take their turn. So if you have a question, raise your hand, and Adam Taft will find you.
Question for Senator Dole.
Sure. Are you outside?
Here we go.
Oh. Got a good system here.
Yes, ma'am.
Senator Dole, I just wondered what brought you to the decision to build this great place to offer all of us a place to discuss politics.
How did we do it, or why?
Why, sir?
Why?
Yes, sir.
Well, I had a call one day from Chancellor Hemingway and Jordan Haynes, who's done a lot of fundraising for the university. And Jordan Haynes and Phil Anchu to talk to the Chancellor about maybe finding a repository for my papers. And that's how it was initiated, and one phone call followed another, and before long, and I insisted that if you're going to build anything with my name on it, I want at least half the money to come from the private sector and not get it all from federal funds, and we've more than matched that. So once that happened, we were sort of on the way. We now hope to build an endowment so we can have some income every year to take care of some of the obligations, but that's how it started, I think. Did you call me? Yeah, I mean, I didn't initiate it. That's the point I'd make. I didn't think my name needed to be on anything, but it is, and I'm proud of it, and so far it's served its purpose.
Thank you, Senator. Let's go outside to Gaston for a question from the outside.
Anybody out there? They're probably frozen. Can't raise their arm.
Questions? Somebody here must have a question.
Well, all you're thinking of a question. I was on Leno last week, and they asked me to compare my book to Hillary's, and I said, well, it's pretty hard to compare because mine is nonfiction. And then they asked me to compare my book to Bill Clinton's. I said, well, his is longer, but he had more explaining to do. And then I said President Bush had already read both covers. I'm sure I won't be going to the White House soon. But
Senator, we have another question here, sir.
yes.
Senator Dole, I wondered if you know how many of your platoon are left, and if so, do you maintain contact with them?
The answer to both is I'm not certain how many are left, but I do maintain contact with them, particularly my first sergeant, who when I first joined the outfit, second lieutenants were sort of expendable in those days. When I first joined, I got sort of the cold shoulder from all these guys because they're pretty battle, they were battle hardened, and I was this fresh 90-day wonder from Fort Benning. They didn't think I knew which way to go even, and but Frank Carafa was my first sergeant, and I let the platoon know very early that he was going to continue to run things. I was just there sort of as a CEO, but he would be the operating officer. And then I made it a point to always eat my meals with the men, not to go to the officers' quarters where they always had a little different food. That wasn't much better, but it was different. But Sergeant Carafa has made a statement on what he did to help me that day, and he did drag me to a safer place, but I think he feels very guilty about that because he grabbed me by the right arm, which is the one that was really pretty badly damaged, and he always thought since then that maybe he made it worse. I don't think he did, but he kind of looked over at me that you can't wait if somebody's wounded. You got to keep going. You can't, otherwise there'd be nobody fighting. And I'll pick out a wounded guy and say, I'll stay with him, But there were about 4 people that day, 4 sergeants. One came by and put morphine, took my blood and put an M on my forehead, which means I had a morphine shot. Don't give him any more because it could be fatal. That was Sergeant Kuschik. Ollie Manninen, who was a world-class skier, also stayed for a while. And then a young fellow named McBriar from Tennessee stayed with me a while, even though he wasn't supposed to. And about 7 or 9 hours later, the litter bearers came and took me down the mountain, or down the hill 913. But so I have constant contact with Frank, who's not very well. He has kidney dialysis 3 times a week. He just lost his wife about 3 months ago. But he wants to get the Medal of Honor. I don't know whether how you can get it for helping me, but I wrote a letter of recommendation. So.
Senator Dole, we have a question in the back from Staff Sergeant Felty, United States Marine Corps.
Oh, thanks for your service, first of all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, Senator. First, let me thank you for all your unending dedication to this great country. Also, my question is, from your experience of being injured in war, what type of words of wisdom and strength did you give to the young soldiers that are coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan right now?
Well, I visit Walter Reed Hospital quite often. In fact, I was a patient there. But on Christmas Day, Elizabeth and I had lunch with all the people who were able to get out of their beds and come to lunch. And I meet with the amputees and others quite often. Let me tell you just about one 36-year-old woman whose name is Major Duckworth from the Chicago area. She was flying a helicopter and was hit by a missile of some kind. She's lost both legs. Her right arm is damaged. And what is her goal in life? She wants to go back to Iraq and fly helicopters, fly choppers. Now, I don't see how it can happen, but she said, I'm going to have to go through a lot of appeals, and because you can stay in the service now with a disability, which I think is a very good thing. For some of these young men and women, it takes a while to adjust, and while they're doing that, they can stay in the service. But my advice to anybody is don't give up. I mean, if you can't do it one way, try to adapt and do it another way. And you see some very, very tragic cases, and nobody wants anybody hurt. Nobody wants anybody obviously killed in any conflict, but it happens in a war, and particularly when you're dealing with these people who you can't negotiate with terrorists. There's nobody to negotiate with. They don't have any organizations you can say, let's talk to the defense secretary, or let's sit down and see if we can't negotiate a ceasefire. They don't have any respect for life, whether it's a baby or whether it's a 90-year-old woman or whether it's any kind of a vulnerable group. They could care less. A death is a death to them, and they're going to a better place if it happens. So it's pretty hard, but I think my advice and I must tell you, the morale of these young men and women is fantastic. And they called us the greatest generation. Tom Brokaw in his very best-selling book for I don't know how many weeks. But I think that's sort of a generational thing. In my view, now the best generation are those serving us in Iraq and Afghanistan and the DMZ, in Korea, all around the world. But their morale is high, and you can see these young men with maybe lost one arm, one leg. As I said, this young lady, 2 limbs and 1 arm that doesn't work very well. And I'm sure this isn't true in every case, but most of them want to go back, or they're anxious to get on with their life. And they'll have a life, and they'll have people to take care of them. The Marines sort of follow their people even after they've been released and discharged into the private life they go into to make sure they're properly taken care of, and I think other services do now. There have been so many good changes. And I was asked today in Wichita, do you think we take care of our veterans? I'm certain maybe a very few slip through the cracks, but I can't think of any other country that expends the money which we should expend to care for our veterans, whatever it may be. Now, if you're not service-connected, the benefits aren't as good. If you're service-connected, if it happened in a war zone, you could be thrown out of a Jeep or you could be injured by gunfire. If it's service-connected, obviously your benefits are a little better. But now you can buy your drugs at the VA, which saves you how much? About 80%? Yeah, so it's a big, big savings for seniors who happen to be veterans.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Staff Sergeant Felty, for your service. Let's go outside. Gaston, our volunteer, has a question.
Senator Dole, I'm wondering about political debate and political conversations these days. I'm wondering what you think about the nature of political discussion and debate between the 2 parties in the Capitol.
Well, they don't have enough discussion. They have plenty of debate, particularly on the weekend talk shows. What they need is sit down and discuss with each other and try to resolve some of the issues, whether it's Social Security or whether it's the judges or whatever the issue may be. It could be a Democratic issue or a Republican issue. I don't know whether somebody said, well, don't you think it's gotten worse since you were there? And I said, well, I don't know, because if you're not there, and I've been gone about 9 years, you're not there every day to see what happens and know the personalities. It's pretty hard to make a judgment, and I wouldn't make a judgment, but there appears to be more confrontation, and the makeup of the Senate is 55-45. The House is a little easier to deal with because they have their own rules and they can get things passed. The Senate just takes 1 or 2 people to block it. So, but my view is that you ought to try to reach a consensus, whether it's judges or, I think Social Security, I think there will be a consensus. I think sooner or later there'll be enough Republicans and Democrats of like mind who will sit down and work out something to protect Social Security for the next, I don't know how many years. It's in good shape till 2018, really until 2042. So it's pretty hard to get members too excited about something that's not really going to go bankrupt until 2042. Many of them don't think they'll be here that long. And why make this tough decision? It's like backing into a buzzsaw when you start playing around with Social Security. And not that many profiles encouraged as I look over the Congress. But we did it in '83 because if we didn't do it, by July of '83, the checks would have been delayed 5 days or 10 days, which keeps delaying amounts to a cut. You only get 11 checks a year instead of 12. And that's, I might say modestly, one of my proudest achievements working with Pat Moynihan. I must say compromise is a good thing at a state level. It's certainly a good thing at a federal level where you have very close division among the major parties. Anybody else?
Another question outside.
Senator Dole, do you feel that the military was a good preparation for the political arena? It toughened you up, so to speak?
Yeah, I got shot at, which is good training for politics. Yeah, well, it's, you know, Senator Mitchell was majority leader, and I've been the majority leader. Senator Robert Byrd of West Virginia. if you don't want to be a leader, you can be totally nonpartisan, but you don't elect nonpartisan leaders. If you don't want to carry the flag, you know, there are plenty of people who want to carry the flag, but you can be partisan without being mean or nasty. And Senator Mitchell and I had a very good relationship. He was always accused by the Democrats of giving too much away to Bob Dole, and I was accused by the Republicans giving too much to Mitchell, which meant we're probably both doing a pretty good job. But you pay a penalty for leadership. Tom Daschle, been a friend of mine for years, lost his seat in South Dakota because he carried the banner for the Democrats, and there was a lot of obstruction in the Congress. Tom, I can say proudly, is now a member of our law firm in Washington, D.C., so it's a non-bipartisan group. He's not a lawyer, which is another plus. I don't want to offend any lawyers in here, but...
We have another question inside now, Senator.
My name's Thad Carver, and I wanted to draw on your experience as Senate Majority Leader and Minority Leader in light of the current pulling and tugging over the the federal judge appointments and the thought of changing the Senate rules regarding the 60-vote majority. And I'd just like your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Well, I'll have an op-ed in tomorrow's New York Times about that very question. I think it ought to be a last resort. They ought to be staying up all night long, every night, trying to figure out some way to do it without tinkering with the rules. But the rules have been changed. In fact, Senator Byrd, who's now leading the opposition, changed the rules a couple of times and was defeated trying to change the rules a couple of times. And as long as I was leader, we never blocked a nominee from getting a vote. I could have done it, and I was a leader for 12 years, so I can stand here and say it never happened. The only one that's even a question is Abe Fortas was nominated for the Supreme Court by Lyndon Johnson, but he didn't have the votes, and they withdrew the nomination, and he later resigned from the Supreme Court because of scandal. And that's a nomination that shouldn't have been cleared. So you're going to have some of those, whether you have a Democrat or Republican president. But if everything else fails, then if you're the majority party, you're supposed to lead. And you're going to have to do what you need to do to lead. It's nothing that hadn't been done before. I remember one of the judges that I opposed, I voted to shut off debate because I didn't think he ought to prevent having a vote, and then I voted against the nominee. He was confirmed anyway by the Senate. So you can keep your integrity by voting whatever you want to do to shut off the filibuster or not shut off the filibuster, and then vote for or against the nominee. But I really think this battle's not about appellate judges. Most of the district judges have been confirmed. What they're worried about are appellate judges, because that's generally where a president goes to find a Supreme Court justice. And some of these 7 who haven't been confirmed are outstanding men and women and might be Supreme Court material. And the best way to stop that is to stop it now and not confirm anybody. And I think that may have some bearing on what's happening. But hopefully, Harry Reid, who's a good guy, and Bill Frist, who I respect a great deal, maybe there's still time to work it out. But if it's not worked out, I think it's going to happen. And the Democrats want to shut down the government, something we did, and not over my objection in 95. It really hurt us in the 96 election. You don't shut down the government. Republicans thought they were going to do it, and everybody was going to fall behind. But if you don't get your government check, you're going to say, well, who held it up? And President Clinton was smart enough to put the monkey on our back, and it helped them in the 1996 elections. So I think my advice to either party is don't shut down the government. If somebody works for the federal government, they don't get their money, they're not going to be very happy. They don't care what your party is. So.
Thank you, sir. Outside now for the next question.
Could you please share with us one of your favorite memories at your time spent here at KU?
Favorite memory was talking to Dean Woodruff. Anybody here remember Dean Woodruff? I do. He said, you know, you're not doing very well in class. Bob, have you thought about joining the service? And I did. I enlisted, I think, the next day. But the conversation sort of happened about like that, but he was very nice. But that was his job, to bring us in and say, you know, I know you can do better than what you're doing. And I was having trouble with logic. I was getting D's in logic. I've never been very logical. So but, and rhetoric, I don't know, they still teach rhetoric here? Yeah, I did better in rhetoric. But that was just one. There's a lot of good memories about KU. Just the people, the friends you make for a lifetime is probably the most lasting memory you have. People that you follow the rest of your life. Young men and young women, if you're in a fraternity or an independent house or just don't belong to any, you're in class together and you get acquainted and it becomes part of your life. It's sort of an extension of your family. And I think that's probably the lasting memory you have, because it lives on and on.
Thank you, sir. Another question from outside, please.
We'll take about, I don't know, a couple more, and I know some of you have other things to do, so.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to know your view on women fighting in combat, since it hasn't been done in previous generations until now.
Well, personally, I have a problem with that, but when I talked to this young major I mentioned earlier, certainly she was in combat, and she thinks she's qualified to be in combat, and she doesn't want to be discriminated against. I mean, it's hard. It's a tough question for my generation. Maybe it's generational, where we think that our job is to defend women, not to send them into harm's way. But things have changed in 60 years, and people have a different view. I don't know what if I took a poll in this room, it might be 50-50, I don't know. But women are in combat, and they're doing a good job, and they're suffering because of, they're making sacrifices. But I think they understand that when they go into the service, that things will happen, and you could be engaged in combat somewhere, and when that happens, somebody's going to be hurt. I don't remember which president said war is hell, and it is. But how are you going to prevent it? And that's a whole new debate that we probably can't get into. But so I would say I think they can do the job. It's not a question of they're not being able to do the job, just a question, I have trouble with a woman doing that. I think they ought to be doing other things that can be just as helpful, not getting shot at. Save that for the men. Don't save it, I mean.
Thank you, Senator. One more outside, and we'll come back inside for one.
Okay.
How would somebody like me get into politics?
Well, it's pretty easy. You got the filing fee, and one thing I think I'd suggest is first get involved in somebody's race. Either party, get involved in whether they're running for the legislature, state house, state senate, governor. There are always a lot of opportunities. City council. I mean, all politics is really kind of local, as Tip O'Neill said. And see if you like it. And you meet a lot of nice people, even people who aren't going to vote for you. Almost without exception, are very courteous. And I can only think, in all the times I ran for office, I don't think over 5 people refused to shake hands with me. And that's not bad, because I've been doing it for a long time. And so most people are very nice, even though so it's hard to get it, if you really got a feel for it, you really want to get into it, you can learn that in the process of helping somebody else.
Senator, we have one last question outside for you.
Okay.
Outside.
Yes, Senator Dole, I heard you speak this morning on NPR with our Kansas City Star individual, and you talked about if not for your battle experience, you might not have gone into politics. Where were you headed career-wise before the war, and what caused you to change your mind and eventually go into politics?
I'm not certain if I could say that with total accuracy, but Senator Inouye, he and I were in the same hospital. We were both with about a mile apart in Italy, and he was wounded a week after I was wounded. We didn't know each other, of course. End up in the same hospital, and he claims, he has in his book, that we talked about politics, and if Danny says we did, I guess we did, and that I encouraged him to go back and run for office. Now, I don't recollect that, but it could have happened. But I don't know what I would have done. I hope I would have gone. We had the GI Bill, which meant that I could go back to college and maybe study a little harder, apply myself, because when I came back after the war, my grades were very, very good. But I just don't know what I'd done. But I wanted to be a doctor, but my grades weren't good enough at the time. And I think I finally sort of went through my mind, if I can't use my hands, maybe I can use my head. And so I decided to go to law school, knowing that some people don't like lawyers. That wasn't a consideration. But whether you ever use your law education, it's good for anything you do, good for business or just having that information. I think you learn how to make decisions, you learn how to judge things, and that was the biggest thing I learned in law school. But I'm in a law firm now, but that doesn't mean anything. I'm supposed to make it rain, rainmakers. People flock into the law firm. In my case, it's only sprinkles now and then.
Please join me in thanking Senator Dole for a wonderful lecture and for his years of service. Signing, and then please stick around and enjoy some food and music outside. It's a little chilly, but I think that the feeling will still be warm. Thanks again.
Yeah, that's You'll Never Walk Alone. Yeah.